Good morning. Welcome to Athens Christian Church on this beautiful morning. As we continue our Vanishing Grace series, there's been a lot of talk about thirst. I just wanted to read a passage from Isaiah 41, verses 17 and 18 that address this idea. Isaiah says, "The poor and the needy search for water, but there's none. Their tongues are parched with thirst. But I, the Lord, will answer them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will make rivers flow on barren heights and springs within the valleys. I will turn the desert into pools of water and the parched ground into springs." What he's saying is that there are people who are wandering around with a thirst, who are desiring something desperately, and they find nothing. But we come together and we come to this fountain, to the source of all that is good and the source of living water. And so as we celebrate this morning, as we worship our God, we are being, as we're pouring out ourselves before God, God is there refilling us and restoring us and giving us that living water. And so I just ask you to put that sort of picture in your mind as we worship God this morning, that as we pour ourselves out, He fills us up. So let's stand this morning and sing together. Wonderful grace of Jesus, greater than all my sin. How shall my tongue describe it? Where shall its praise begin? Taking away my burden, setting my spirit free. For the wonderful grace of Jesus reaches me. Wonderful the matchless grace of Jesus, deeper than the mighty rolling sea. Higher than the mountains, sparkling like a fountain, awesome grace for even me. Broader than the scope of my transgressions, greater fall than all my sin and shame. Oh, magnify the precious name of Jesus Christ, His name. Wonderful grace of Jesus, reaching the most divine. By its transforming power, making of God's dear child, purchasing peace and heaven for all eternity. For the wonderful grace of Jesus reaches me. Wonderful the matchless grace of Jesus, deeper than the mighty rolling sea. Higher than the mountains, sparkling like a fountain, awesome grace and grace for even me. Broader than the scope of my transgressions, greater far than all my sin and shame. Oh, magnify the precious name of Jesus, praise His name. Oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing my great Redeemer's praise, the glories of my God and King, the triumphs of His grace. My gracious Master and my God, assist me to proclaim, to spread through all the earth, the honors of Thy name. Jesus, the name that turns our fears, that bids our sorrow cease. 'Tis music in the sinner's ears, 'tis life and health and peace. He breaks the power of cancelled sin, He sets the prisoner free. If I can make the palace clean, His blood avail for me. Sing the wondrous story of the cross to Calvary. How we love His holy glory, for the cross is our free. than the mountains that I face, stronger than the power of the grave, constant in the trial and the change. One thing remains, one thing remains. Your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love. And on and on and on and on it goes. It overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. Just one thing remains. One thing remains. Your love never fails, never gives, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives, never runs out on me. Your love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid. There's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love. You are good, you are good, when there's nothing good in me. You are love, on display for all to see. You are light, when the darkness closes in. You are hope, you have covered all my sin. You are peace, when my fear is crippling. You are true, even in my wandering. You are joy, you're the reason that I sing. You are light, in you death has lost its sting. No, I'm running to your arms, The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. You are more than my words will ever say. You are Lord, all creation will proclaim. You are here, in your presence I'm made whole. You are God, of all else I'm letting go. And no, I'm running to your arms, The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. My heart will sing no other name. Jesus, Jesus, my heart will sing. No other name. Jesus, Jesus. Oh, I'm running to your arms. I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see. Children can be dismissed at this time.
There's a place where mercy reigns and never dies. There's a place where streams of grace flow deep and wide, where all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes rolling down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in all of you. I'm in all of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you. I owe all to you. peace with God and forgiveness. All the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you. I owe all to you. Here my hope is found. Here on holy ground. Here I bow down. Here I bow down. Here arms open wide. Here you save my life. Here I bow down. Here I bow. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you. I owe all to you. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white. I owe all to you. I owe all to you. I owe all to you. I owe all to you, Jesus.
How can I help you, Governor?
They tell me there's going to be an investigation.
For Russ Duritz, time is money.
Stop crying. No, I mean right now. You're giving me a headache.
An image is everything.
Jerk.
You lousy jerk.
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 If you get called a jerk 4 times in the same day, does that make it true?
What, only 4? Did you get up late?
But in the business of giving advice, he's the one who needs help the most.
There is nothing wrong with me.
Take your phone off. You're with a human now.
Now, on his 40th birthday,
Just when I think I've seen the worst in you, then I get the tiniest glimpse of the kid in you.
he'll get a magical chance to rediscover himself. As Russ Duritz, the man,
I know you.
meets Russ Duritz, the kid.
Are you who I think you are?
Russell Morley Duritz.
How'd you know my name?
I'm dreaming!
I don't think you're dreaming, because you're talking and your eye is sort of twitching.
One man
How's many you?
That's hilarious, Janet.
and one boy will get a second chance
Holy smokes!
at life.
What happens next between being me and becoming you?
Disney's The Kid.
That movie, The Kid, it's about an image consultant. And image consultants typically are hired by people or corporations that are in the public eye. And it's their job to change the way that people view those products, those companies, those people. The great irony of that movie is that the image consultant, the one whose job it was to improve how other people viewed his clients, was really the one in need to change his image. Everyone saw him as a jerk. And it took a younger version of himself to make him realize that fact. Well, unfortunately, our world sees many parallels between that story and the lives of Christians. An image consultant who is a jerk is like a Christian who talks about love and grace and then treats people unkindly. This morning, we continue our Vanishing Grace series addressing the image problem that faces modern Christians. Instead of grace bearers, we are seen as bringers of judgment and hostility. And it is up to us to change that image problem. And we can't expect our government or community organizations to enact change. And we don't hire an image consultant. Instead, we do the work of the image consultant. Instead, we love and we extend grace to make up for the bad rap that Christians have gotten. This morning, we're going to delve into the nuts and bolts of how that is actually done. I've coined a term that I think sums up a solution: grassroots grace. A grassroots movement is something that is done at the lowest level, as a community rises up to lend support to something or to change something. And that's how our image problem is going to be changed, at the smallest level, in daily interactions between people. Because big Christian organizations haven't been able to fix the problem. I mean, think about it. There are a lot of Christian groups, and they're doing some awesome things in this world. Habitat for Humanity builds homes and gives dignity to people. The Salvation Army provides charity. Soup kitchens feed people. Churches provide benevolence as needs are presented. But all of these Christian-based groups that are showing this grace and love to our society have not changed the overall stereotype that Christians are unloving. So upper-level organizations cannot fix our image problem. You and I must change it on a personal level. You and I must start a movement of love and compassion. That is grassroots grace. And begins with relationships with people that we encounter. I want to turn to the story of Jesus talking with the Samaritan woman to illustrate this. As we learned last week, these were enemies. And yet Jesus engaged her and met her where she was. And where was she? She was at the well at noon. Now, some people think she was there during the hot part of the day because she was a pariah, even among her own people. I mean, after all, it seems more prudent to get water in the morning when it was cool, or in the evening after it had cooled down a bit. And maybe that's the case. Maybe she was an outcast, even among her own circle of acquaintances. Maybe she was unused to receiving grace and love. You know, there are many people that we will encounter that are in the same situation. Perhaps they didn't receive much love from their family. And they surely aren't going to get it from our world that holds men and women to impossible beauty standards and impossible achievement standards. You know, it's sad to think that most people's interaction with others is not typified by love and grace, but by disdain and judgment. And so perhaps this woman was all too used to such a reception by the people she encountered. But Jesus didn't treat her that way. Jesus looked past these things and met her where she was at and awakened in her a thirst that she had pushed down. She came to the well to meet a physical need, water, and was unaware of her spiritual need. She needed living water far more than she needed drinking water. And so Jesus identified that spiritual thirst, and he offered to quench it. You know, Jesus had a knack for seeing the symptoms of spiritual thirst: a restless search for pleasure, fear of death, boredom, addiction. Any of those things could betray a longing that is at root spiritual. The cries and the whispers of someone who has lost their way. Bono, the lead singer of the band U2, during his concerts sometimes shouts this indictment of us all, revealing our thirst. He'll yell out, "I went looking for spirit and I found alcohol. I went looking for soul and I bought some style. I wanted to meet God, but they sold me religion." You see, there's a thirst in all of us. And what separates us from non-believers is that we have quenched our thirst with the living water. And in this brief exchange between Jesus and the Samaritan woman, Jesus demonstrated a model for relating to a pluralistic culture. He didn't express disdain at her terrible life choices. Instead, he tuned into her underlying thirst. You know, I think that teaches us something very important about why grace seems to be vanishing. Far too often we try to fix people by addressing a spiritual need with a physical solution. For example, imagine that you have an alcoholic relative. Some of you may not have to do too much imagining. And much of the time we shake our heads and we think, get it together. Maybe we even tell them, you need to get off the booze and get your life together and get right with God. And we think that we're helping. We're addressing a physical problem, but we're completely overlooking the spiritual one. The problem is not just addiction. The problem is that people fill the holes in their lives with things that are supposed to be filled by God. And that's why I love the approach that Chad's Hope, the addiction recovery group that came and presented to us a while back, the approach that they take. It's not just about getting someone off a substance, because it's all too easy to leave their care and fall right back into the same patterns. It's about replacing the addiction with the power and the presence of God, which is exactly how we were created to live. And so when we encounter people who are involved in things and doing things that are just wrong or immoral, maybe even disgusting to us, before we pile on the judgment about what they are doing wrong, and we offer advice about what they should be doing, we need to focus on their spiritual thirst that continues to go unsatisfied. We need to remind them of what they're really thirsting for. It's not a substance. It's not attention. It's not physical satisfaction. It's a hole that only God can fill. See, this world still thirsts, but we aren't meeting that need. There's far too much talking and not enough acting. There are not enough grace dispensers in this world. That's such a great phrase, grace dispensers. We have a lot of different kinds of dispensers, don't we? Water and medication and antibacterial soap dispensers. But the best dispenser is a Pez dispenser. Thank you, Cameron. Right? These things are great. They come in all sorts of different characters, and it's candy and a toy all wrapped up in one. You can't beat that. You pull back the head, and out pops the candy. It's great. But when you think about it, a Pez dispenser is just a gimmicky thing that hands out candy. More often than not, I'd rather just take the candy and eat it straight in. Why do I have to put it in the dispenser and get it out one at a time? I'll eat like 4 at a time, right? It's a hassle. Maybe that's how people feel about Christians. Gandhi is credited with saying, "I like your Christ, but I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." People often miss Christ because we're in the way. That's why we need to be grace dispensers who make it easy to see Christ. And what separates a grace dispenser from a Pez dispenser or anything else is that being a grace dispenser is an active stance. It's not passive. It's going out into this world and being ready to pour out grace when the time is right. You see, Jesus has granted us, his followers, the immense privilege of dispensing God's grace to a thirsty world. The uncommitted, they share many of our core values. But if we don't live out those values in a compelling way, we will not awaken their thirst for the ultimate source. Christians can do no better than to follow the example set by Jesus. He specialized not in techniques and arguments, but in spirit. An example. And he took skeptics seriously, listening to them and responding forthrightly yet compassionately. He engaged in grassroots grace. So what does this grace dispensing actually look like on a grassroots level? We'll turn to 1 Peter 3. In his letter, Peter gives us some advice about how to interact with this world. Starting in verse 15, he writes this: "But in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. It is better, if it is God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. For Christ died for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God." Peter is speaking to a group of Christians who are being persecuted by the Romans. Remember that. His advice is pertinent now more than ever, as we seem to be living in a post-Christian world. He understands that his audience is interacting with people who are uninterested in the Christian faith, if not downright hostile to their faith. And so he gives some very practical tips for interacting with non-believers in a grassroots grace sort of way, that makes us become better grace dispensers. First, I think he says, be purposeful. Look again how this passage begins. But in your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord. Peter says that our purpose in this world is to set apart Christ as Lord. That means making sure we know who is on the throne of our lives. Who is the one in control of what we do, how we act, what we think. Because if we are on the throne instead of Christ, grace and love will not be our first thoughts and our priority. A while back, I showed a video called The Stool that metaphorically symbolized who is on the throne of our hearts. And after Jesus sat on the stool, the woman actor kept trying to get back on it. She would nudge Jesus off the bed or maybe even get on top of Jesus on the stool. Because it's not easy to give over complete control to Jesus, to let godly things dominate our lives. But if we do not purposefully take ourselves off the throne and put Jesus on, we will never fulfill our role as grace dispensers. When we set apart Christ as Lord, then we will be people who are full of grace. It has to begin internally. It begins in our very hearts and souls as we give ourselves and our selfishness over to God and say, not my will, but your will be done. It's not an easy thing to do. You know, it takes work and practice and repetition. I think one of the best ways to practice is by transforming your pet peeves into opportunities to extend grace. When you pull into the grocery store parking lot and someone has left a cart right in your spot, don't get all upset. Just bring it into the store with you. When you're driving, let someone cut you off. Don't ride their bumper, or worse, just give them the spot and move on with your day. You know, I think it even starts among children. What is the biggest offense a grade schooler can commit against another? Cutting in line. That is forbidden. And when they get all upset about it, he cut. That's not fair. I was in line. When they get all upset about it, feeling that this is such a great offense, what it really reveals is a lack of grace. Kids need to be taught, just like adults, that it's just a line to get some water. Aren't there more important things in life? And this goes back to what I said earlier about addressing the physical versus the spiritual problem. You can punish the cutter. You can make him or her go to the back of the line. But what about the mentality that is causing the child to cut? It's left unaddressed. And furthermore, if you blow up at the kid, instead of showing grace, you'll never be able to talk about the underlying issue. And I could give you example after example of things that we could do better to practice showing grace. So if we want to become grace dispensers, we need to retrain how we view people before we ever encounter them, so that we won't have the non-grace reaction that is our normal first response. We need to intentionally practice what is a good response, because our reaction is who we really are. If our first reaction is one of anger, then Christ is not on the throne. Our selfishness is. There is no such thing as fake grace. You can't dispense it if Christ is not your Lord. So we need to have the purpose of becoming gracious people with Christ on the throne. Well, next, Peter encourages us to be prepared. He says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Notice that Peter doesn't start with this. His first piece of advice is not get your answers and your apologetics all lined up. No, first, we must be graceful people. When people think of us, they think kind and loving and gracious. And when that groundwork has been laid, then we can talk. Cory Booker, former mayor of Newark, has summarized it this way. He said, before you speak to me about your religion, first show it to me in how you treat other people. Before you tell me how much you love your God, show me in how much you love all his children. Before you preach to me of your passion for your faith, teach me about it through your compassion for your neighbors. In the end, I'm not as interested in what you have to tell or sell as I am in how you choose to live and to give. Because when we are filled with grace and people know who our Lord is and what we stand for, opportunities will arise. Your life as a Christian should make non-believers question their disbelief in God. How you conduct yourself, how you treat other people should be so startlingly different that it causes people to ask questions. Why didn't you go off on your coworker? Why do you spend so much time doing church stuff? Why aren't you looking out for yourself more and getting what's yours? Why don't you work the system? Why do you let people take advantage of you? Why don't you try to get back at people? Why do you still do what is right, even though no one's going to know either way? And when those questions come, which they will, we need to be prepared to answer. The answer is not, oh, I don't know. I don't even think it's, well, because the Bible tells me so. I really think it comes down to our realization that this is the best way to live. That your life is not your own, but belongs to the one who has given it all for you. That's what verse 18 says. For Christ died for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. I live this way to experience new life, a life that is on a higher plane, filled with the presence of the divine. And how you word that truth, it may be different for different people. There's a survey of Americans a while back that asked them what words they would most like to hear from other people. And it's no surprise that I love you was number one. Number two was I forgive you. And a surprising third was supper's ready. We all like to have supper ready for us, don't we? And those three statements that Americans desperately want to hear provide a neat summary of the gospel story. We are loved by God. We are forgiven. And we are invited to the banquet table. In the midst of a planet marked by brokenness, the gospel is truly good news. It will quench the spiritual thirst, and it is our hope for this life and the next. And so we need to be perceptive and we need to be prepared to give an answer about the hope that we have. Not about why we are right and why they are wrong, but about hope, about new life, dispensing grace and truth in equal measure. Well, finally, I believe Peter encourages us to be patient. Verses 15 through 17 say, but do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. It is better if it is God's will to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. You know, it takes time and patience to bring people to a place of repentance and faith. So we need to be in for the long haul, because there's no trick to bringing people to Christ. There's no secret code to break so that people come to faith. Instead, we patiently meet people on their level. And our gracious interaction with them ideally will pique their thirst for something greater. On Wednesday evening during our Bible study, we saw a video that told the story of the relationship between atheist Christopher Hitchens and the world-renowned geneticist Dr. Frank Collins. The two had often met in the past as adversaries in a debate about the existence of God. And against the odds, they had become friends. Through various exchanges, they dialogued about faith and about whether God existed in a very cordial and respectful manner. And then when Hitchens was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, Dr. Collins used all the resources at his disposal to help him. And though Hitchens did not have a deathbed confession, he did ask for prayers near the end of his life. You know, if we looked at this interaction from a pragmatic point of view, we might think all that time wasted and he didn't convert. But that's not what a grace dispenser does. We patiently continue to love people in the midst of and through their messes, hoping and praying that they realize their thirst. And Peter describes the way in which we do this with gentleness and respect. even if they don't respect you, even if they are not gentle with you. You take your time. You don't shove it down their throats. You set the example of how interaction should occur. Because if you don't, you just contribute to our image problem. You confirm the faulty stereotype that people already have about Christians. And Peter says you might even suffer for such a stance. It might cause you more problems than you signed up for. But if you suffer, it should be for doing what is good, not for doing what is evil. If you suffer, it better be because you were too loving and too gracious rather than too forceful. If we are going to change the image of Christians and make grace reappear, we need to improve the way in which we interact with others. So let me offer you a few suggestions. First, view others as spiritually thirsty rather than as wrong. Again, I said this earlier, but the only thing that separates us from them is that we have had a drink from the living water. So let's step back from an us versus them attitude and become more thoughtful and considerate in expressing truth to people we disagree with or who don't believe as we believe. And when we are criticized or falsely judged, respond with a gentle answer that turns away wrath, according to Proverbs 15:1, as opposed to a hostile and harsh attack that escalates it. Also, seek to convey God's good news of forgiveness and hope, not just in words, but hand in hand with sincere and loving action. You know, it's a trite bumper sticker, but it's right. They'll never care how much you know until they know how much you care. You see, the uncommitted share our thirst for something more. They may even share many of our core values. But if we don't live out those values in a compelling way, we will not awaken a thirst for their ultimate source. The early church understood this approach. A Roman historian in the first century described Christians with the following: they marry like everyone else, and they have children, but they do not destroy their offspring. They share a common table, but not a common bed. They exist in the flesh, but they do not live by the flesh. They pass their days on earth, but they are citizens of heaven. They obey the prescribed laws, all the while surpassing the laws by their lives. They love all men and are persecuted by all. They are unknown and condemned. They are put to death and restored to life. They are poor, yet make many rich. They lack everything. They overflow in everything. They are assailed by the Jews as barbarians. They are persecuted by the Greeks. And yet those who hate them are unable to give any reason for their hatred. It sounds a lot like the Peter passage, doesn't it? Early Christians lived by different standards than the surrounding culture. They didn't wage culture wars. They lived a certain kind of life that first attracted the attention of outsiders and ultimately won them over. They were grace dispensers, and it started on the smallest level. You know, it's the same for us. Grassroots grace starts with small, seemingly insignificant interactions with people. Our family, our friends, coworkers, neighbors, maybe even strangers we come across. But they are not insignificant. They are at the beginning of something incredible. Like water, grace flows downward. It begins as a small channel in a melting snowfield at the top of a mountain, trickles down to form streams, then a roaring river, and finally settling into a wide lake. Grace flows freely, gaining momentum and mass with every little contribution. So may we live in a way that is so significantly different from the norm, from everything that the world sees around them, that even those who disagree with us can't miss the grace of Christ and are drawn to faith in God. Stand and sing this morning. Joy will Precious name of Jesus, how it fills us with joy. He is loving us, receive us, and our souls are done with joy. Precious name, oh how sweet, hope of earth and joy of heaven. Precious name, oh how sweet, hope of earth and joy of heaven. Maybe so. I'm forgiven because you were forsaken. I'm accepted, you were condemned. I'm alive and well, your spirit is within me, because you died and rose again. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you. In all I do, I honor you. I'm forgiven because you were forsaken. I'm accepted, you were condemned. I'm alive and well, your spirit is within me, because you died and rose again. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you. In all I do, I honor you. Glad you joined us in worship this morning. If you have a prayer request or a ministry need, or you're visiting with us, please fill out a card and then put it in the plate as it's passed around. A couple quick announcements before we head out. Later this afternoon, we have a board and elders meeting, so if you're part of those groups, please be here for that. This evening at 6, we're going to do what's called a concert of prayer. Basically, it's a time of guided prayer where you begin on your own and you slowly add people until we're all you got to show up and it'll all be provided for you. After church, the first installment are going to be delivered. So they help with that. Drive out to Bethany area to drop off boxes. Please let Leela know, I guess, and Todd, very helpful for that. Also, if you're still available. Sponsor one. We could probably do 31 if you're really interested. We will not turn you away.
All the food has been purchased, and I spent $905.
So that will provide them food for 2 months or so as they do it, whatever they can do with it. So it's been a great thing, and hopefully we'll be able to see them their gratitude and thankfulness for that as we see them. A lot of people getting fed who don't normally do. It's a disaster. All right. Any other announcements?
I have all the food at my house, and I need help Tuesday night getting it out to the church. And then Wednesday night after the service, we will send the boxes.
Okay. So if you can help in any of those ways, please let her know. We might just stand as we have a closing prayer and song. Well, God, we praise you for being our source of water in a dry and thirsty land. I pray that as we feel parched and lacking, we turn to you to fill all of our thirsts and all of our needs. You are a great God who desires to pour out love and blessing on his children. And I pray we awaken a thirst in people we encounter. We show them there is a better way to live. Through your Spirit, God, work on their hearts and minds. And as we have opportunity, I pray that we're able to engage them and to hold out the water of life. God, in all things, we give you glory because you work in and through people in so many ways. And so may you be praised as people come to a saving relationship with you, as they turn and find you. Through Christ, we pray all these things.